Hello and welcome to WriterSpeak, a program dedicated to the written word and those who produce it. Today in the studio, I would like to welcome Shirley Zindler. She has written the book, The Secret Life of Dog Catchers, an animal control officer's passion to make a difference. Welcome to the studio, Shirley.
Thanks so much for having me.
This has been a very interesting book to read, and I think the first thing that I would like the audience to know is that proceeds from this very original book go to an organization. Could you tell us about that?
What I'm doing is a portion of proceeds are going to the Love Me, Fix Me program. It's a local program for spay and neuter. And we have the van that goes out into the communities, especially some of the lower income communities and the less served communities. And basically they provide spay-neuter services, they're providing vaccines, microchipping, the animals are getting a health check before their surgeries, of course. And it's just a great program that's going to really impact the community as far as preventing more unwanted animals from being born. Animals that would be competing with what's already born and looking for homes and shelters. So what I'm doing is, as soon as the first 1,000 books are sold, I'm donating $500 to the Love Me, Fix Me program. That's we're pretty close. I think I'm at about $925, $950 last time I checked. Boy. So as soon as we reach that 1,000, I'll be donating $500 to that program. And then I'll be looking at some other programs or possibly more to that one. But yeah, one of my reasons for putting the book out there is to spread the word about animals in need. Although I try to keep it upbeat rather than having it, sometimes it gets a little depressing seeing how many needy animals there are. But I try to keep the book pretty upbeat. But I just want to make people aware there's so many wonderful animals waiting for homes. And there's so much good that can be done by providing more spay-neuter services that I'm really excited to be able to do that.
Well, that's a wonderful organization to be able to help. I also was reading that you started out by getting involved in a Kickstarter program.
That's how I raised the funds to publish my book. I'm self-published. And my writing class instructor from a class that I had taken mentioned Kickstarter. I was trying to save up the money for the editing and production and that kind of thing. And she mentioned Kickstarter, and I thought I would try it. And it was just a great, really a fun way to raise some funds. And people that kicked in on the Kickstarter program, got books and other rewards. Some of them got pet portraits and that kind of thing. So it's not asking for something for nothing. It's saying, help me reach this goal and you'll get something back as well. So that's been fun.
How did you first begin to enjoy animals?
I was born into an animal-loving family. My parents had horses, dogs, cats. We lived on a ranch, and they were very, very involved. And my earliest memories are of being around animals and really enjoying it. And I just grew up in that environment, rode horses, had dogs and cats, and pretty much every kind of pet you can imagine. And I was always rescuing any little orphaned creature that I found and bringing it home and caring for it. Even as a child, I bottle raised, orphaned raccoons and puppies and kittens and that kind of thing. So that was, it's just a great place to grow up on a ranch and have the animals. And some of the time it was pretty remote where we lived, and there weren't a lot of kids around to play with. And I was happy running around with the horses and the dogs, and so it was a lot of fun.
What county was it, or state?
I was actually born in Southern California, San Bernardino area, but we moved, we bought a ranch in Oregon when I was a child. Oh. And then we were there for a few years, back to California for a while, and then I lived in Idaho as well for a while, and did a lot of riding the year that I was in Idaho. And then I've been back in California since I was probably 12 or so.
Well, that explains it. Being in a rural environment really does form your life, I think.
It does. And even once I was back in Sonoma County, we lived in the country, and I had the horses and the dogs and the other pets, which I really enjoyed.
And in your book, you tell how you became an animal control officer. Tell us about that.
I started out, I walked into a shelter when I was about 18 just to see what it was like. I'd never even been in an animal shelter. And it was the Rohnert Park shelter, our local Rohnert Park shelter. There was a couple of volunteers there that were very welcoming and invited me in, showed me around, and there was a little kitten that was failing, and they were waiting for it to see the vet, but they were thinking that it probably wasn't going to survive. And I asked if I could take it home, and they, to my absolute surprise, they let me. And I took her home and nursed her back to health and found a great home with my uncle's family. She lived for another 18 years. And that was kind of my start with shelters. And then I progressed to a paid position there at the Rohnert Park shelter. And then I've also worked with the Humane Society, and I worked for several different vet clinics. When I was going to college down in San Luis Obispo, I was an assistant manager at the Woods Humane Society, which was a private shelter there. And then when I came back here, I was a stay-home mom for quite some time, but still volunteering and fostering for shelters, Rohnert Park and Humane Society. And then after 9/11 happened, my husband's career, which he's a pilot, took a real hit, and I had to go back to work. So I started at our county shelter, Sonoma County Animal Control, as a vet tech and loved it. And then a few years in, an animal control officer position opened up, and I thought that looked like the most fun. It really seemed like it would suit my personality, and I've been an animal control officer there ever since, which has been about 9 years now.
Yeah, I wanted to know how many years it's been.
Yeah, so about 9 years as an officer, which really, like I said, it really suits my temperament.
There's a lot of adventures in your book. Tell us how your family gets involved in some of these adventures. You have 3 children, is that right?
I'm raising 3. I have 2 biological children, and then I'm raising my niece. So
it's 3.
It's 3, exactly. Yes. So, you know, my husband usually hears about my adventures after the fact, which is probably good because he worries. I do bring home a lot of foster animals, animals that I've picked up on my cases, either orphaned, neglected, or whatever, and just needing some care before they can be adopted. And so I bring a lot of them home, and you know, it's extra work for my family sometimes. And thankfully, they've been very, very supportive. And especially my husband is just a prize and welcomes everything I drag home. So that's a plus.
Well, children and animals go together very well, especially as they get older, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
I like that you have a photo of an animal at the beginning of every chapter.
And those photographs are all photos that I took, in the course of my job or caring for the animals. In fact, the little girl on the front was one of my foster puppies. It came to me at about 4 or 5 weeks of age, and she was very, very tiny. Her owner had been arrested, and in the middle of the night, and another officer went out to pick her up, and she was so tiny and so needy. She was really too young, to be left at the shelter. So she came home with me. That's Olive, and she ended up getting adopted by a friend of mine. So I just saw her a few days ago. She's a big girl now and doing great.
Huh. And what are some of the most unusual animals that you have rescued?
Wow, where do I start? Pretty much any kind of wildlife or livestock that you can think of, I've dealt with, including some exotics, 6-foot boa constrictor, a Nile monitor that was pretty aggressive. Certainly the wildlife is exciting, the deer and the raccoons and that kind of thing. My favorite are ones where I can, rescue the animal and release it back into its environment. But very often I end up taking them up to the wildlife center if they're wild, or to the shelter for the domestics, or even home. So that's a lot of the fun parts of the job is the rescue and the variety, and I can pretty much find something to appreciate about every type of animal, so I always enjoy it.
How do you physically protect yourself?
We wear quite a variety of gear on us. I worry more about the people on the job than the animals. The people that I deal with in some cases are far more dangerous than the dogs or horses. We do wear a bulletproof vest, and that actually provides some protection from animals as well.
When you say people, do you mean the people are sometimes hostile towards you?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, I see.
In fact, there was an animal control officer killed in the Sacramento area last year just on a very routine call with no expectation of any danger from the situation, and he was killed just walking up to a house.
Oh, I
Shot and
bet your
killed.
husband reacted to that one.
Yeah, that was hard for him. He didn't like to see that. So he's glad that I wear my bulletproof vest, which is wonderful, but it's no guarantee. I mean, there certainly are the dangers on the job, and I deal with a lot of aggressive dogs. Some large livestock. I had a bull charge me recently. Pretty good sized bull. The wildlife certainly can hurt you. I picked up a coyote not too long ago and took her up to wildlife, and they're gonna defend themselves and bite if they can. And most of the time, I feel like I have the skills that I need to deal with the animals on the job. The people take a lot of work. There's a lot of unstable people that have animals, and so sometimes if you go to remove their animal from them, which we're only going to do if it's extremely dangerous to the public or seriously neglected, but the owner may not see it that way. And I've been threatened before, and really felt like my life was in danger at times, and luckily got out of it okay, but there's a risk to it.
Mm-hmm. A friend of mine went on a ride-along with you, and I didn't even know that was possible.
Oh, absolutely. I get a lot of people requesting ride-alongs because it's interesting, and a lot of people that are animal lovers are really interested in the job. And sometimes I take a ride-along and I have not a single interesting call the entire day. But it's always fun to chat, and I can fill people in on what might happen in some cases.
Well, tell us what a typical day would be like if there's such a word as typical for you.
There is somewhat, in that I work 4 10-hour days, so I usually start my shift at 7 a.m. That's assuming I haven't been on call the night before. I'll come in, any calls that are waiting to be addressed, I'll investigate, do any kind of research, find out if we had any history on the situation, check and see if there's dogs involved, if they're licensed, or if we have any background of aggression or anything from them. Gather up my calls, finish up maybe any paperwork from the day before if needed. I usually take a walk through the shelter just to see what animals are there, that have come in since the day before, and I'm always amazed how many wonderful, wonderful animals are waiting for homes at the shelter. And then, I'll gather up my list of calls, head out in my truck. I do carry a shotgun and a rifle. I carry a lot of other equipment. We have an asp baton, a collapsible asp on our belt.
So you had training with guns?
Absolutely. Yeah, we go through quite a bit of firearms training. And the guns are mainly used for field euthanasia of critically injured wildlife. When you have a deer that's been hit by a car and has several broken legs, they're so reactive. They will injure themselves more if you try to help them. And I've been a volunteer with Sonoma County Wildlife Rescue for many years as well. And it's inhumane to try to rehab adult deer because they hurt themselves more with any kind of interference. And the person could get hurt as well. So we will use a rifle for humane euthanasia of a case like that. Once in a great while, we may need to protect ourselves from a very, very aggressive dog, but I've never had to use a gun that way. But we do have them with us. So we'll load the guns up. We have a gun safe in the truck, load up all our other equipment, head out. And a lot of times it's things like we go from call to call, addressing people's dogs running loose, maybe do some quarantines for dog bites. Rabies control is part of our duties. We'll pick up stray animals. We might have loose livestock that we need to investigate. We might come across a stray just randomly and try to bring it in and get it safe in the shelter off the streets and that kind of thing. And then we get the emergencies that are kind of come in through the day, and that might be anything from a drug raid where the police are asking for our assistance to get the dogs out of the way. Very often we go in first on any kind of police activity where there's dogs in the house. And so we need to go in and contain the dogs before they can go in and search, sometimes even for their suspects, which is a little sketchy.
So are you on call sometimes?
I am. Normally I would work my 10-hour shift and then hopefully be done and home, but we work quite a few on-call shifts. There's always someone on duty 24/7 in the county. So the on-call shifts, as soon as I finish my regular shift at work, I would start my on-call shift, which would be all night long. And basically I'm available to be dispatched through the police and sheriff's departments for anything that that needs to happen. It might be a cockfight, it might be an arrest with an animal involved, or an animal, especially like DUI arrests or something like that where there's dogs in the car. An injured animal, a hit by car dog, injured wildlife, things like that, or a loose aggressive dog. And after hours, we only go on critical emergencies. So we're not going to address a stray dog after hours. But anything that would be public safety, even loose livestock in a road where there might be an accident, would be a public safety issue. Mm-hmm. An aggressive dog or an animal that's critically injured, we would of course go on. So
now you're saying we a lot. Are you going out with another animal control officer or not necessarily?
Normally we work alone, but if there's any question about our safety, or just that we need more bodies to try to capture an animal, then we would call for another officer. And I just say we as meaning myself and all the other officers that are handling calls in Sonoma County. But most of the time we do work alone, and sometimes it's dangerous. We have during the day we have a dispatcher who keeps an eye on us as far as if we haven't checked in a while, they'll start calling us, and if we don't answer, they'll send another officer to check on us. So.
Oh, good. You mentioned cockfighting, which I read about in your book. I was pretty surprised by that. And you have in the title dog catcher, but of course, really your title really is animal control officer.
Absolutely.
Which means any animals. And I never even imagined that you had to be involved in cockfighting. So I'm sure our audience would really be interested in hearing about when you have had to get involved in cockfighting.
Sure, and the cockfighting has really become a problem in the county. It's very cultural. It's very, it's a big deal for a lot of people, and we'll find of course it's against the law, so people will be, in sheds or, back roads or whatever, and there will be, sometimes there's hundreds of people there and hundreds of birds, and if we get called in, it's a huge job. We always, bring sheriff and other law enforcement with us to help make the arrests and that kind of thing. But it's very involved. There's usually hundreds of birds to confiscate. They can't be kept together, so you have to house them all separately. Then there's often the court trials. I was injured on one. The birds still had the blades, and what they do during the cockfight is they actually attach these razor sharp blades to the bird's legs, and these roosters are naturally aggressive with each other, and they will attack each other and slice at each other with their legs, and they have naturally occurring spurs on their legs, which can be quite sharp, but they're not usually lethal. Whereas when you attach these razor sharp blades, man-made blades to them, they really do a lot of damage, and the fight is usually to the death. And during a raid, there was some birds that still had these blades on, and when I went to impound them, one attacked me and sliced me up pretty good on my arm and left some scars. I had to go to the ER and be stitched up. And usually there's a lot of dead birds, if we get called in partway through the fight or whatever. So it's just a big job there, to try to go in and address that and, get the word out that it's not acceptable here.
So have you been injured quite a few times in your role as an animal control officer?
The worst injury has probably been the cockfighting injury. I've been bitten a few times, but not very much. Most of the time, I feel like I have the skills to keep myself safe, keep the animals safe. For a lot of aggressive dogs, just some patience and maybe a treat will go a long way. And there's some that aren't going to come around for that. So, we have our catch poles and whatever that, give us a humane way to protect ourselves. And most of the aggressive dogs that we deal with will be aggressive. People are running away and the dogs are being terrible. And as soon as we get out of the vehicle and approach the dogs, they pick up on the fact that we have a way to protect ourselves and that we have some confidence with the dogs. And most of the time the dogs will turn and run. But occasionally they will still come out, and aggress at us. And, there's been some officers besides myself bitten as well. And it's, there's a risk to it.
Yeah.
But most aggression is fear-based. And most of these dogs are saying, I'm scared, so I'm going to act aggressive to make you go away. Mm-hmm. And of course people go away and it works and it's effective. So the dog says, oh good, I'm going to do that some more. Mm-hmm. And so, very often we can bring them around just by addressing their fear. And as soon as we get a hold of a lot of these dogs and they haven't been hurt, they usually will come around. So
we would really love to hear a passage from your book.
All right. I consulted with my Facebook friends as far as what I should read.
Oh, that's a really good idea. I've never had anybody say that.
I would say most of the people wanted me to read this story. The whole story is called Where's the Roast, but I'll just read a portion of it. And the rest wanted me to read one called The Attack of the Killer Pugs, which is really very cute. So I will read a portion from Where's the Roast. And the gist of it, of the rest of the chapter, is just that dogs get into trouble, and dogs will chew your shoes if you let them, and they'll get into food if you leave it out. So I will start here. And then there was the time with the turkey roast. I had gotten off work early and driven an hour and a quarter to the airport to pick up Paul, but his flight was delayed, and it was after 11 p.m. when we got home. He was ravenous. It was his birthday, and he was home for only one night, so I really wanted it to be special and cooked his favorite foods. I had asked our teenage daughter to put the roast away after they ate, but there was no sign of it. "Where's the roast?" I asked, utterly puzzled as I searched the refrigerator. "I made a big turkey roast for you for your birthday." The pan sat neatly on the counter with a ring of cooked-on juices showing where it had been. "Maybe the kids ate it," Paul said, looking around absently before reaching for the peanut butter and jelly. It was huge. There was no way they ate it all. I went to Nikki's bedroom and gently woke her to ask what had happened to the roast. She mumbled sleepily that she had forgotten to put it away and didn't know where it was. I wandered back towards the kitchen, still totally stumped. My eyes rested on Hula, our golden retriever, sleeping peacefully on her bed in the dining room. Her eyes were closed, and she appeared to be the epitome of innocent sweetness. Hula is sweet, but she gets into more trouble than all the other dogs combined, and the other dogs were sleeping in other parts of the house. I thought, I wonder. About then, Shay walked through on her way to the bathroom. Overhearing our conversation, she said, "I heard something in the kitchen after I went to bed, so I got up. Hula had her feet on the counter, but it was dark, so I couldn't see what she was doing. I just told her to get out of there, and went back to bed." She rubbed her eyes and continued on her way as Paul and I connected eyes in amazement, and then turned to look at the thieving dog. "You are so busted," I exclaimed, staring at her as she opened her eyes and blinked at me unconcerned before resuming her slumber. I turned to Paul. "I can't believe she ate a whole roast." It's not easy to upset Paul, and he just smiled and shrugged apologetically. Hula is, after all, technically his dog. After getting over my initial annoyance, I went back to my usual living with dogs philosophy, which basically says, if the human can't remember to put the roast away, how is the dog supposed to remember not to eat it? I constantly hear people complain that their dog chewed up their $200 shoes or some other valuable item, and they're so angry at the animal. It amazes me that the human being of supposedly superior intelligence, who knows how much things cost, can't remember to put away valuable items when they have a bored adolescent dog around. Not long after the roast incident, I had a busy day at work and then kept getting called out on emergencies because I was on standby. I finally dragged my tired butt home, sat down for dinner, and 3 bites into it, I was called out again. I drove out to pick up a stray border collie that was chasing chickens, took her to the shelter for impound, came home, fed my 4 dogs and 2 fostered litters of pups, and climbed into the bathtub for a relaxing soak before bed. I let out a long sigh as I settled into the warm water, feeling the stress of the day dissolve as I closed my eyes. As I lay there, I became aware of a sound I couldn't identify, a rhythmic clanging, not too loud, coming from the kitchen. I lay there puzzling over it for a moment before it came to me, that rotten Hula. It was the sound of her tags banging against the pot on the stove. I leapt out of the tub in a fury, threw a towel around myself, and roared out of the bathroom and around the corner to the kitchen, dripping everywhere. Sure enough, Hula was on her hind legs, happily counter-surfing, her head deep in the pot the stew had been cooked in. Okay, I know I should have put the thing away, but still, she needs to have some manners. The other dogs don't do that. "Hula," I yelled, "get out of there. You are such a dirty, rotten, terrible girl." I chased her out of the kitchen and down the hall just to let her know I meant business. I stomped back to the kitchen, got the scat mat, and slapped it on the floor at the entrance to the kitchen. The scat mat is a clear plastic mat with a mild electric charge to discourage animals from getting on counters or other places they're not supposed to be. I usually put it on the lowest setting, but this time I meant business, and I cranked it up to high. That would fix her. I headed back to the bath, muttering under my breath, climbed back in the tub, and tried to relax. Within minutes, my cell phone rang again with another emergency call. By then, I was beyond caring. I grabbed my towel and headed for the bedroom to put on my uniform again. As I passed the darkened kitchen, I realized the window was open, so I walked in to shut it. Holy Mother of God, what was that? I leapt into the air, limbs flailing, heart pounding. It took a moment to realize what had happened. The shock was mild, but in my exhausted state, my bare wet feet on the scat mat was an experience I would rather not repeat. It did, however, effectively cure me from leaving food out.
I really like how you explain in your book and are able to tell people humans are the ones with the brains.
Exactly.
So you need to blame yourself when you leave the roast out.
It's true. It's absolutely true.
You forget to put a safety guard down instead of being angry at an animal who has a smaller brain.
It's true. It's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I always tell people...
The writing is wonderful, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Very wonderful in the book.
I appreciate that. I foster a lot of puppies, and when they go to their new homes, I always, people always ask me about house training and that kind of thing, and I tell them, take a little roll of newspaper and put a rubber band on it and keep it handy, and when your puppy has an accident, bop yourself in the head for not watching your puppy. For not getting your puppy out.
It's the human training.
It really is.
The adult human training.
It's like leaving an infant child without a diaper on your rugs.
So
They're
good.
Babies. They don't, they need the people to teach them.
Could you tell us about your next
Absolutely.
book?
When I first was writing The Secret Life of Dog Catchers, I was thinking I was going to try to go the regular publishing route, and my editor told me that it was quite a bit too long for a publisher. And so I ended up going in and chopping a lot of the stories out, fully intending to use them in the next book. And then in the meantime, since I've written this, so many more things have happened. I probably have enough material for 2 or 3 more books. But in my rich fantasy life, book 2 will be out by Christmas. I'm not sure if with the job and the fostering and life, if that will be the case, but it's actually coming along really well. I don't ever get writer's block. There's always something to write about. And
I imagine so.
One of the best pieces of advice I got early on was just write. You can come back later and fix it. Just put it down. And that's easy for me. I like to do it. And then there's a lot of going back and making it more clear and that kind of thing. But I'm really excited about book 2, and I've got a lot of people telling me they're waiting for it. So
well, tell us where we can buy this wonderful book.
My favorite way is to go through the Facebook page, which is called The Secret Life of Dog Catchers. And there's a link on there where you can order. And that link actually gives a higher percentage to the author, which then gives a higher percentage to the animals. Amazon's great. You can go through Amazon. It just gets get a lesser percentage.
Shirley, it has certainly been a pleasure having you on WriterSpeak. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I would like to thank the audience for joining us on WriterSpeak, produced in Santa Rosa at the Community Media Center. And a special thanks to our sponsor, the Sonoma County Gazette. Please join us for the next episode of WriterSpeak for a chat with a local author.